Yo, what is up guys, Delboy here, aka Blue Collar Sports TV. Hopefully you guys are doing well. If you're new here, smash that like, hit subscribe, all of that good stuff. So, let's talk about Deontay Wilder. Of course, the last time we saw Deontay Wilder in the ring was last October in that trilogy fight with Tyson Fury, which in my opinion was one of the best heavyweight fights in recent years. But ultimately, Deontay Wilder got knocked out late in that fight after putting up a good effort, I would say. And yeah, since then people have been speculating in regards to the future of Deontay Wilder, with many people kind of thinking that he would retire, but all the noise right now is pointing to Deontay Wilder returning to the ring. In fact, Frank Warren, in a recent interview, let it slip that Deontay Wilder could return to the ring in October and against Robert Helenius. And yeah, I wanted to give my brief thoughts on this potential comeback of Deontay Wilder. First and foremost, I'm not the biggest fan of Deontay Wilder. Certainly as a person, I'm not his biggest fan. But ultimately, I do find him entertaining in the ring, and I believe he has a future in the heavyweight division. Do I believe he's ever going to be the number one guy? Absolutely not. But I certainly believe there are some great fights out there for him, some potential barn burners, and good fights in which I would give him a chance. And yeah, the return in October and Robert Helenius as a potential opponent. I have to say, I would be more than satisfied with this comeback opponent for Deontay Wilder. In fact, when I was speaking about this a few months ago, I myself said Robert Helenius would be the ideal type of guy for Wilder to come back against. Now, Robert Helenius is a funny one. I'm not sitting here and saying that he's one of the best heavyweights in the world. Nothing of the sort. But, he's a funny one. Back in the day, and I'm talking 2011, 2012 type of time, when the likes of Tyson Fury, David Price were the hot prospects, Robert Helenius was right there with them. And in fact, if you go back, and find old forums from back in the day, many people were speculating that Helenius would be the best of a bunch. He was showing himself to be a very hard puncher with a pretty good jab, decent boxing ability, very big, very strong. But, he ran into Chisora, which was a controversial fight. He sustained some really bad injuries. And then after that, he had several setbacks, losing to Johan Duhaupas, losing to Gerald Washington. And at that point, it looked like Helenius was on the scrap heap with no hope of any return. But he got that fight with Adam Kownacki, who was unbeaten at the time and a big favourite going into their fight. And he pulled off the upset. He knocked out Adam Kownacki in the third or fourth round. They of course then had a rematch, actually on the undercard of Fury versus Wilder 3, and Helenius once again stopped Adam Kownacki and actually put quite a bad beating on him, So Robert Helenius right now is coming off some real momentum in his career. And yeah, Robert Helenius is one of those guys, he definitely has vulnerabilities. He's not the quickest guy in the world. His chin is somewhat suspect. And, his gas tank certainly isn't anything to write home about. But ultimately, he's a big lump. He has serious power. Even in his jab, he can really, knock you out of your senses. And, that right hand can really put you to sleep. And he's got, solid boxing skills to go along with it. He can box a bit, Robert Helenius. And yeah, as a comeback, I think this is perfectly acceptable for Deontay Wilder. In fact, if you look at this, if Deontay Wilder were to beat Robert Helenius, you could argue that it would be his second best win after Luis Ortiz. So I've got no problem whatsoever with this fight, because ultimately Robert Helenius is one of those guys where if you're at the elite level in the heavyweight division, you should beat him. But if he catches you slipping, he can knock you out. If he catches you with that right hand, he can seriously hurt you. And, given the fact that Deontay Wilder hasn't been all that active in recent years, and he's coming off two really bad beatings, who knows where Deontay Wilder is at right now. But I think this is a perfect sort of yardstick fight to see where Wilder is at. It's a winnable fight, but at the same time, it's a credible fight because Helenius does pose some risk here. He does pose some danger, and ultimately that is the sort of comeback fight that Deontay Wilder needs. Like, someone like Adam Kownacki wouldn't really prove much in my opinion because, you know, Kownacki looks like damaged goods. He himself is coming off 2 bad losses. And yeah, stylistically, I don't think he's got what it takes to really trouble Wilder or seriously put him in jeopardy. Whereas Helenius, you know, he's got that power, he's got that height, he's got that reach, he's got that size. So yeah, I mean, I like this fight. I actually quite like this fight. I think it's a good gauge to see where Wilder's at right now, ultimately. And yeah, it would be interesting to see what would happen if Helenius catches Wilder early. How would Wilder react, you know? But yeah, I mean, I'm all for this fight. I mean, ultimately, you know, if Wilder were to come back, I was expecting a lesser opponent than a Robert Helenius. So yeah, for me, this is perfectly acceptable, and I would somewhat look forward to this fight. And if, you know, if Wilder were to beat Helenius, then I think somebody like Andy Ruiz, providing Ruiz beats Luis Ortiz, would be ideal for Wilder. I mean, Wilder versus Andy Ruiz would be a big fight in the States, I would have imagined. I'd assume that fight would do good pay-per-view numbers. So, you know, there's definitely a route for Deontay Wilder to come back. And realistically, he's only really sort of 2 fights away from challenging once again. Because as I say, if he fights Helenius and beats him, and then beats somebody like Andy Ruiz, he's right back into the mix, you know? So yeah, I mean, I'm all for this fight. What about you guys? How do you feel about this fight? Would you be satisfied with his comeback opponent, or would you expect something a bit better? Share your thoughts below, I'm interested to hear. Beanie Guy Delboy, peace.